If you have a pension, then I'm going to share some things that you need to be aware of to make sure you can enjoy this retirement that you've been working so hard for, and to make sure you understand that your situation is unique. Less than 20% of people have a pension, and that there's a lot of things you need to be aware of, such as potentially higher tax brackets, Social Security tax. You have to worry about Medicare premiums, something called the widow's penalty. And then we're going to talk about at the end of the video of a certain strategy that we're seeing a lot of our clients with pension utilizing right now that can save you lots of money in taxes, but also allow for your spouse to be in the best position. And so that's what's to look forward to on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
Pension planning is a fun one for us. As you know, not a lot of people talk about pensions. We get a lot of viewers on our YouTube channel who have pensions, who love the content we produce on pensions, and a lot of our clients have pensions themselves. And so we want to break it down of all the things. I wanted to build a checklist of all the things to make sure you're aware of if you do have a pension as you look to enter into retirement. So either if you are retired or near retirement, this video is for you there. And again, this video is for those who are Midwestern millionaires, middle-class millionaires, also known as those who've been diligent savers. They've saved up $1 million or more. Those who have been extremely hardworking and diligent. They're frugal. We often say they're better savers than they are spenders. And so if you're in that category, you're going to love these videos we do. You're going to love this one today. And our goal is to make sure that you have all these in place moving forward. So the first thing I want you to be aware of if you have a pension is that you could be in a higher tax bracket in retirement. This is one that many people say, hey, I don't know if I'll be in a higher tax bracket in retirement because I'm going to have a lower income. I'm not going to be working. Well, that may be true for a lot of people, but for those with pensions, it's just typically not true. And the reason why it's not true is because you have a pension and you have Social Security. And again, if you've been a diligent saver, you're going to have IRA withdrawals on top of that. So maybe if you don't have any investments, that may not be true. You may be in a lower tax bracket if that's the case, but it's when you start to take withdrawals from your investment is when that really starts to force you to be in higher tax brackets. And so we do have to understand that. And one of those things that can cause you to pay higher tax brackets in retirement is required minimum distributions on those investment withdrawals I've just talked about. And so this is something, if you like it or not, the government's going to tell you to do it. And it's at age 73 or 75, depending on when you were born. And so basically how this works is, let's say you're 73, you're going to have to take out 4% from your investments. So if you have an IRA with $1 million, you're going to be required to take out $40,000 from that. Now, that could be a big problem for a lot of people, again, especially on top of your pension, Social Security. But where this really leads into problems is, what if you see growth in that investment? What if this $1 million grows to $2 million, right? Well, now you have to take 4% out of $2 million. So maybe you're 60 years old and you expect that $1 million to grow to $2 million by the time you're 75. Well, now you have to take out 80,000 instead of 40,000, which is, what you could think. And the other thing to be aware is if it grows beyond 73 or 75, every year you go on, your withdrawal rate for that RMD increases. By the time you're 90, that can get up to 8 or 9%. So if your investment grows and your withdrawal rate grows, what happens to the amount you have to take out of your investments? Ultimately, that's going to grow as well, which is going to lead you to being in the higher tax bracket situations like I talked about in point one there. So those are things that we want to try to get ahead of and look at ways to reduce our required minimum distributions so that we're not going to be as impacted in the future. And we're also going to talk about what that RMD can do to widows as well, and we'll talk about that later on in the video. But just making sure we understand how much that can impact things. And there's two things particularly that I want to talk about here that can impact, and that's Medicare premiums and Social Security tax. And so we'll start with Social Security tax because that's a little more simpler for those with pensions. Understand that you may always have Social Security fully taxable. You may always force yourself into that Social Security tax torpedo if your pension is a much higher amount. But for those who maybe have a smaller pension, they could find themselves in that Social Security tax torpedo. We've done other videos on this, and this is when you force Social Security to be fully taxable. So understand how Social Security tax works. If your income is a lower amount, you don't have to pay any tax on your Social Security. If your income starts to rise, more of that Social Security starts to become taxable. And it doesn't come fully taxable right away. It starts to become 10% of it will count as tax. 20% and then up to 85%. So you may find yourself of, wait, hey, only about 40% of my Social Security is taxable. But if I take out another, extra withdrawal from my investments, now I'm not only having to pay more in federal taxes, I'm going to have to pay more on my Social Security tax. So that's something that we really want to be aware of, and those RMDs can drive us over those points, and it just may not be needed. So again, just something to be aware of. Again, if you have a really high pension, really high Social Security amount, you may always be over that cliff, that torpedo, and you're really not planning. There's not much planning you can do. But if you are in a different situation, just be aware of that. And then the other thing I mentioned is Medicare premiums. So Medicare premium is probably one of the bigger things that people with pensions are worried about. This is called IRMAA, IRMAA, Income Monthly Related Adjustment Amount, I believe is what it is. Again, I should know that off the top of my head, right? So hopefully the editor of this channel, Josiah here, can get this right. So he can show it on the screen if I didn't say it right. If so, then it'll just show how smart I am, right? But no, I'm kidding. So with Medicare premiums, basically how this works is at age 63 is when it starts to get calculated. So I know you're confused here because you're thinking, Joe, I don't have to start Medicare till 65. Why does 63 matter? And the reason why is because they look back 2 years to determine how much you pay in Medicare. And so if you have a higher income at age 63, you're going to have to pay more potentially at 65. And that always looks back 2 years. So again, going back to my stacking analogy here, if you have a pension, you have Social Security, you have an RMD, or you have investment withdrawals, and maybe capital gains on top of that as well, what is your income going to be in the future there at 63 and on? And what we see with a lot of our clients is they may end up in higher tiers due to that investment withdrawal, due to that RMD, and that's going to force them to pay higher Medicare premiums for the majority of their retirement. And so again, you want to try to get ahead of that earlier if you can, or during that time, which we'll talk about at the end of the video as well, of how you can do that. But paying more in Medicare premiums is no fun because you don't get better coverage. The other consideration is that it can lead to thousands of dollars more in Medicare premiums. And we ran calculations for clients where they would have to pay $10,000 more a year between both of them in Medicare premiums if we had no plan. If we did have a plan, then we could save that $10,000 a year. Is all things that you can look forward to by just making sure you're doing the right things if you do have a pension. So again, stay tuned for the end, and we'll talk about how you can make sure you can plan against them as well. Because at the end of the day, let's make it very clear, having a pension is not a bad thing. Having a pension is an incredible opportunity that many people don't have. I mean, to have a guaranteed income that you can rely on every single morning you wake up for the rest of your life, and potentially for your spouses too if you've selected the survivor option, that's a pretty good benefit to have. And you can run calculations. I've actually done a video on this where that can lead to millions of dollars over a lifetime if you accumulate and take that pension over time, depending on how much you get there. And so not anything we're complaining about on today's video. We're just making sure that you are maximizing your situation so that you're not overpaying in taxes, or that you're not losing money because you're not aware of all the things out there that this high income will do to you. So by no means am I telling you to talk bad about your pension or wish that you didn't have it. I'm just saying that we need to plan differently. So I hope that gives you some clarity and confidence as you enter retirement, because like I said, only 20% of people have a pension, and most people are responsible for their retirement, which gets really, really hard as time goes. And so to be able to have that other stool, that other leg of the stool as we call it, because a lot of our clients who get Social Security, they have a pension and they have investments, we'll call it a three-legged stool, like federal employees, for example. So there is some people with pensions who don't get Social Security, so keep that in mind on some of the topics we're talking about. But you can see how this can be so useful. And the last point I'll mention here to make sure you're aware of if you have a pension is the widow's penalty. And this is a big one because if you have a widow's penalty, what that means is your married filing jointly tax brackets nearly get cut in half and go to single, which can mean you pay nearly double the amount of taxes. And so that can be very significant. And so if we have these RMDs we talked about, if we have, now we have higher Medicare premium tiers as well, being single versus married filing jointly. Single, Social Security tax is more likely to hit, fully taxable as we talked about. The widow's penalty can cause you to pay much more in taxes at that time. And so the key is like, hey, if we know that we're going to have this survivor pension and we know that we're already going to force our tax brackets higher if we are single, what are some things that we can do to ensure that we're not overpaying in taxes? How can we utilize the married filing jointly rates now versus single rates in the future? And that's the strategy that we'll talk about here. But also understand with a survivor pension, You don't have to take that. I'm not trying to advise you not to. I'm just telling you to run the numbers and see if it makes sense. And I'll tell you that many of our clients, we've not taken it, but also many of our clients, we have taken the survivor pension. So it depends on a lot of factors there, such as, what's the age of both spouses, what's the health, how much of a benefit are they giving? Are you eligible for life insurance? Is life insurance going to make sense to do so that you can have more flexibility? There's all these different things to look into, but the first thing we want to make sure of is that that spouse is good to go moving forward. We didn't get all this way to just take a chance and say, let's not take the pension so we don't have to pay for it because there's extra cost to get it. Let's not pay for it so we can have a little extra money to spend. But if something happens to me, like we may not be good, we don't want to plan for that. We want to make sure that regardless of what decision we make, that spouse is good to go. It is really the key that a lot of the clients we work with want to make sure that they're doing. So just something to consider there. So let's now talk about a strategy that we're seeing a lot of people with pensions utilize right now to really put themselves ahead, to really get ahead of some of these concerns that I'm talking about. And this strategy, if you haven't done it yet or you haven't looked into it, make sure you write this one down. I've got a lot of other videos on this channel on it. It's one of the most popular tax planning strategies right now, I would say. And this strategy is called a Roth conversion. And what's unique about a Roth conversion, it's a very simple strategy, but it impacts so many different things, and it really literally impacts every single thing that I talked about today. Of all the things you need to be aware of, a Roth conversion can help impact and make it better for those situations if it's in the right scenario. And so what a Roth conversion is, you take money from tax deferred and move it to tax free. So IRA to Roth, for example. If you do that, you have to pay the taxes now. So what we do with the people we work with is we see, does it make sense to pay that tax now, or does it make sense to pay it later? So those are the things we look at. But I can tell you, when we run the math for many people we work with these higher income scenarios that we're expecting in the future, it's going to make sense to Roth convert because, as I mentioned, pay the taxes now at lower brackets versus potentially higher brackets in the future, like we talked about earlier. Or this allows us to have a lower RMD in the future, and that's going to allow us not to have to take out as much income at higher tax brackets. And so those are all things that play together. But also Medicare premiums, right? Maybe we can do Roth conversions now before 62 or before, and we don't have to worry about paying more in Medicare premiums to shift this money over, and we can raise our income in those years. And then later on, we don't have to worry about taking out money and paying tax on it. We can pull it from a Roth, which is tax-free and doesn't apply to income. Or maybe in the widow's penalty scenario we just talked about, now that spouse who is single, they just lost, one of the Social Security benefits is also a part of the widow's penalty. Now they can take out from Roth, and they're not having to pay taxes on it. So you can see how all of this plays together, especially in Social Security tax, right? If we're taking from a Roth, that doesn't count towards the Social Security provisional income to show if that's taxable or not. And so you can see how all these things can stack and really lead to a lot of success. So whenever someone says like, hey, I'll just do a Roth conversion, like I'll just move 100,000, I'll be good. I mean, you can do that if you want. I mean, it's your money, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to share strategies and ideas, and you do what you want. But you may not fully optimize it and find the advantages of all these areas, but if you just guess. And so that's where we really recommend you work with an expert who's factoring in all these, so that when they make that one Roth conversion decision, it's not one decision, it's 10 decisions that have been brought down into one. It's a decision of, how is this going to impact my Medicare premiums? How is this going to impact my Social Security taxes, by the way, not now, but also later. So there's two decisions on Medicare. How is this going to impact it now? How is it going to impact it later? And you could even say that that's multiple more decisions, because how is it going to impact it at 65? How is it going to impact it at 70? How is it going to impact it at 75? Right? You have to have a long-term view of this and understand that every decision you make is going to have a pro and a con, and how is that going to work together, right? How's that going to impact my RMDs? What's that calculation now going to look like if I do this versus I don't? And that's something we do with our clients, is we show them, hey, if we make no changes, here's the path that we're on. If we make tier 1 change, this is where we're going to be. If we make tier 2 change, which may be a little more aggressive, here's where we'll be. Or maybe tier 3, if we make a really aggressive recommendation, where would that be? And then from there, we look to see tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, what makes sense, right? And what others in between could make sense as well. So again, just a full analysis here. And whenever you look at Roth conversions, understand I'm making it sound simple, but it is much more comprehensive. Work with a team of professionals who really understand this. If you're working with an advisor already and they haven't brought this up, then I would highly encourage you to make sure you're working with a team who is, because this is such an important part of planning with pensions. And maybe your advisor just doesn't specialize in pensions. I'm not sure who you're working with, but just make sure you really are having all of these things pinpointed, because this can lead to having great success in retirement. And then here's the last challenge I'll have for you. is what are you going to do with all this money you save? You know, most people say, I'm going to spend it, or I'm going to give it, or I'm going to do something purposeful with it. And that's our whole point of this channel, is making sure that people can maximize their retirement, do what they want with who they want, when they want, and have that sense of purpose that they've been working so hard for. So, you know, for the Midwestern millionaires we work with, that middle class millionaire, you know, they've earned it, they deserve it. So let's make sure we're living that out, is something we always encourage. So with that being said, if you love the content we do on pensions and you felt this video was very helpful for you, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. That does a couple things. One, it allows you to get notifications whenever we do additional videos like this moving forward, so that you can be an avid viewer of this channel. And we'll make content like this specific. We don't do any other content except for those that content is for is in or near retirement and those who've been diligent savers, Midwestern millionaire concept. And so if that's you, go ahead and subscribe. We'll keep the content coming. But that also allows us to reach other people out there like you who can see these videos. So the way the YouTube algorithm works, I don't know how all that works, but basically if more people subscribe, it shows the channel to more people so that they can get the content that they're looking for. So our whole goal of this YouTube channel is to reach as many people as possible, and we'd love your help to do so. And with that being said, that's all we've got today, and we'll see you on the next one.